You know, it's ironic when you think of Mario Andretti and you think it 25 years ago he had his last IndyCar win. Where were you when you first knew who Mario Andretti was?
His last IndyCar win, I threw away the win because I was leading the race here by 2 laps and crashed in turn 1 trying to lap Jimmy Vasser, and then he went on to win the race. So it's hard to believe that that was 25 years ago.
When you hear the name Mario Andretti, PT, what comes to your mind?
Wow, he's a legend. You know, he's the icon of the sport. Him, AJ Foyt, Dan Gurney, Parnelli Jones. Those guys are the 4. If you had a racing Rushmore,
yeah,
they're the racing Rushmore. Those 4 guys right there.
When you look at Mario Andretti today, I hear people say he's really no different today. He walks around with that big smile, and fans are important to him.
No, he loves being at the races still. He still loves to drive. He's out in the 2-seater giving rides. He loves to go to track days. He loves to be around the races. He loves to be around the people. And to still have that much enthusiasm for racing and just to be a part of it is pretty awesome at his age, because I think when I get to that age, I don't know if I'd have that much energy as him.
You know, you say, you know, it was your race really to win his last win. What's the adrenaline like to be able to race against a Mario Andretti?
Well, when I first started, when I started my racing career in Indy cars, I was racing against Mario Andretti, Emerson Fittipaldi, Rick Mears, Danny Sullivan, Ari Luyendyk, Al Jr., Michael Andretti, Roberto Guerrero, and the list goes on and on and on, Nigel Mansell. So it was pretty intimidating for me as a 22-year-old kid to come into that now. To come into it at that time was very, very intimidating, because these guys were like gods, right? They'd been Formula One world champions and been around the sport a long time, and I'm just some young kid. And times now are so much different than they were back then. Young kids now are coming in to Formula One and to IndyCar at 18, 19 years old. And it's just so much different now with simulation, and guys are practicing year-round in simulators and driving all the time, that you actually don't have to physically be on the track. And I'm not a simulator guy. I still don't believe that it's the real thing as being on the racetrack. I think you can practice it, but guys are getting so much experience and getting to learn the track so quickly now because of simulation, that these kids are walking into IndyCar races and they're not scared. They're not frightened of Scott Dixon or Dario Franchitti or Tony Kanaan. They're coming in and they're ready to rock and roll. And I guess I was the same way, but I was just cocky and brash, you know?
Okay, you just took the words out of my mouth. When you came in and you said, you know, you were somewhat intimidated and everything, and you named some of the biggest legends in motorsports history. But yet they were saying about you what you just said. Who's this young, cocky, brash, full of himself driver? And they were thinking, this young punk's going to come along and kick our butt, okay? I think it's amazing to hear you, Paul Tracy, say what you just said, because you brought on this whole persona and this whole character that made you who you were today. And I think that's what really balanced things out. That's so refreshing to hear you say that.
Well, my dad always taught me when I came up through racing. My dad always said to me, he said, listen, if we can't win the race today, make sure nobody forgets who you are when you leave the track. Do something that's so crazy and wild that when they leave, they're going to be saying, oh my God, did you see what Paul Tracy did today? And even if I didn't win the race. So that was kind of the mentality that he kept driving into me from when I was a young kid, from when I started racing at 5 years old, that make your mark, whether you win or lose, make sure everybody's talking about you. And that's kind of how my whole career went.
When you think about Mario Andretti's personality, would you say that he's shy, he's humble, he's cocky, he's abrasive? How would you classify him?
I wouldn't classify him as anything. He's just Mario Andretti. He doesn't come across as cocky or brash or understated, or he's he's kind of like the dean, you know, of open wheel racing in the world.
What does the name Andretti mean in the world of motorsports to you?
Well, it's huge. Obviously, you know, Mario's name is synonymous with racing around the world. Now, obviously, Michael and I, we clashed and butted heads a lot, but no question that Michael's ability as a race driver was phenomenal. He won tons of races, won championships, and now has won as a team owner tons and tons of races. Now, you know, him and I butted heads like crazy. We didn't get along on or off the track, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for Michael and Mario.
Finally, growing up, either watching it on TV or you've watched it on the internet over years, you've seen photos of Mario Andretti. Is there anything that sticks out in your mind that you remember most, or maybe was one of the more spectacular things about Mario Andretti?
I mean, obviously, I think getting through the 70s when he was racing anything and everything from a sprint car one week to a Le Mans car to a stock car to an Indy car and then back into a sprint car, to survive that era of racing and then still go on into the 80s and 90s and be competitive at his age. He retired at almost 50 years old and was still winning races. It's pretty phenomenal.